Hello, and welcome back to the Ever-Changing World podcast. I'm your host, Ava Zanetti, and today's episode is going to be pretty touchy. It's going to be touchy in the sense that it is an event that's recent. It's quite recent in the time of recording. To announce right at the top of the episode, I am recording on Monday, March 7th at almost 9 p.m. Eastern Time at night 2022. So it is really recent. The event has pretty much just happened. Of course, I'm talking about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Ukraine-Russia conflict, however you would like to word that. It is a war. It is an invasion. And this episode is going to be very touchy for me as well, since it is my 10th episode. So thank you guys for 10 episodes. But really, it's going to be touchy because, not because of that, not because it's, I'm still new, but because this episode is a lot of politics and a lot of world issues happening all at once. So, for me, I was really hesitant on talking about this. I've wanted to talk about this issue for a very long time, but I've been very hesitant to do so. But now, I really can't see myself talking about anything else. I mean, even if you listen to last week's episode, you could probably see how kind of scrambled my brain almost was, because I really talked about this issue a lot then. So I really just want to talk about it today, however long this goes, even if it's 10 minutes, if it's 50 minutes, I just want to talk about it in the best of abilities that I can, given the resources that I have found through trustworthy articles and trustworthy people and trustworthy media and trustworthy timelines. And as well, because this issue is ever evolving and because this issue is happening and happening and happening and happening, I really need to talk about this in the sense of what I know right now. So I'm not going to talk about, the things that, I can't talk about, right? If you're listening to this episode a week later, a day later, a year later, it's obviously not going to be the same news as it would have been. So this is a very timely podcast episode, which is weird for me as well, since I don't really do these either. I mean, I've done one, which is the James Webb Space Telescope, but that one, again, it was more background. Like, you could have kind of applied that to whenever. So this episode is going to be very interesting for me, so obviously bear with me. I'm going to do a quick little top of the show briefing before I get into the content. And I'll do some disclaimers after as well. So this will be a little bit of a quick introduction. Moving on to the introduction, which I kind of just said that right after each other. But moving on to the introduction, if my voice sounds a little weird, which I don't think it does, but it might, I just got my bottom braces put on today. My mouth feels pretty full. I can feel kind of the braces hitting my tongue. Not my tongue, my cheek and my lip, and it kind of hurts, so bear with me while I talk. It really only hurts a lot when I eat, so I should be okay again today. But just so you guys know, if my voice sounds a little off, if I take more water than I usually do, that's probably why. So just bear with me while I record this, getting used to my bottom braces now, because I'm used to my top ones, so just bear with me while I get used to my bottom ones, especially as my teeth are a lot closer together. My bottom, feels really crowded. So yeah, bear with me through that. As well, I've done a little bit of a reading introduction these last 2 weeks, I believe. So I wanted to do a little bit of that before I get into, obviously, kind of the horrible event. I know the top of the show stuff feels really weird. I know it feels weird for me talking about this about the content that I'll be talking about. But I feel that it's still important for me to bring a little bit of that to make, this topic feel a little lighter. So the book that I've been reading, as you guys know, has been The Pilgrimage. I still am reading it, unfortunately, because I am currently reading a book for school. I'm reading A Lesson Before Dying. We're doing lit circles, so basically you get to choose one of 3 books is what we got. We're doing Black History Month 1. This unit, and you get with the group and talk about it. So I'm actually really, really loving this book, and it's really amazing. It's a pretty simple read. It's a pretty easy read, but it's a really amazing. It's called A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest J. Gaines. Just look that up quickly, make sure I got the right title. But it is really amazing. I just started it today. I'm about 80 pages in, and I have to say, I am really glad I chose this book for my English assignment. So I really do have to say this book is really good. And I highly, highly recommend it. It is about kind of the discrimination in the South. So during, kind of the post-slave times and all of that. So it's really amazing. Highly recommend. And yeah, that's what I've been reading. So anyways, I don't really think I can do any more top of the show stuff because I feel like it's kind of an awkward break. So I'm going to do a really quick disclaimer. So the first disclaimer, warning that I want to give, so make sure you're listening to this. For the record, I am not a professional. I am not a professional journalist. I am not a professional news anchor. I'm not a professional anything, okay? I'm not a professional historian. I'm not professional in any of this. I am doing my due diligence and researching proper articles. I have a bunch laid out here. If you saw my tab bar, it's insane. I have a bunch laid out here. I like to give my opinion, so I will be doing that as well. But, my opinions, all of this, these are all from the media that I've consumed. I've consumed as much media that I know is trustworthy as I can. I've done my due diligence in doing that. If you want to check any of the articles that I've linked in, they're always in my bio of this show. So no matter what you're listening on, it may not be a clickable link. I've made a clickable link, but it may not be, but it's there. So if you need to see what resources I'm using, please look at that. Because I will be using a lot of resources today, and I need you all to know what it is I am talking about and what information I'm giving to you. Because it's not just if I was researching stuff that wasn't informed, it's not just me that I'm misinforming, it's you guys as well. So I really do have to say I'm not a professional, but I'm doing my due diligence in researching the proper articles for the time that I'm recording. Again, it's March 7th. 2022 at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Things are developing every single minute. So I will probably not cover things that even happened today. Even tomorrow, which is, I always upload the episodes on Tuesday. Even tomorrow I may not upload the episode. It may not be the same information. Things could change. And next week they could change. So really make sure you look at when I post this and really understand where I'm coming from my perspective and where I'm coming from in terms of what content I currently have and what media I'm currently presented with. Because if I presented with something and you're like, oh, we already cleared that up, this happened or this happened, I may not know that because I'm not in that time period to know what is happening wherever or whenever you're listening to this. So really make sure you listen to when I am talking about this because this is a timely event. This is ever changing, like my show title. So please do so, and please make sure you look at the date. Again, it's March 7th, 2022. And make sure you realize that this is at night, late at night. I'm recording this, and I have linked all the articles, okay? So I think that's good enough of a disclaimer out of the way. As well, I don't want to bring, politics is a very difficult topic to talk about. Politics is something that my mom always told me never to talk about. She always said never talk about religion, politics, money to people. And I've kind of lived by that. I don't really talk about any of those things unless I'm, close to someone and I'm comfortable talking about it to them. But now I have a platform, and now I am not going to put my opinions on whether I think, capitalism good, not conservatism, oh my God, this ideology is bad, right? I'm not going to do that. I am not going to shed any of those types of opinions. This is not the situation to even spread those types of opinions. No matter if I want communism or capitalism or whatever crazy extreme you want to go to, that's not even a topic to talk about. This is a war, and this is serious, and this is not something to bring in our silly dividing politics into it, right? I just want to talk about the issue at hand. And the issue at hand is that Russia has invaded Ukraine. That's it. So today's episode's kind of format in saying that I have a lot on the list, and I don't know how much I'm going to get to. Actually, I already have an idea for one of the points I put, so I may not talk about it. As well, might be a little bit too lighthearted for the type of content I'm talking about today. I thought it might be better to go a little bit more solemn, because that's kind of the content I'm giving. But I will just kind of go over the 7 little points that I had here, 8 little points. I had, for someone to talk about the background and history of the conflict, because it wasn't just that, like, Putin sporadically, well, he kind of did, but besides the point, it's not like he just sporadically decided to spark a war. It's not like, I'm in Canada, right? It's not like Justin Trudeau right now is declared a war in the USA. Like, that'd be random. Like, why would he do that? There's no reason to. There is history behind that, and that's what I want to talk about. So the first thing I'll talk about is the history. I think that's probably the most important. Because, again, this is still really recent for me. This has been only going on for... Let me get my calendar up out, because this started on the 24th. So it's only been, like, what, a week and a half at the time of recording that the invasion has happened. So really, there hasn't been that much time for the actual invasion to happen. There's a lot more history that goes a lot longer. So I will really be talking about that and make sure that, it kind of goes through that. Then the second one I want to talk about, of course, is the events leading up to the invasion. I have kind of an article here that kind of goes through all the events. I really wish I took more screenshots of everything that happened, because everything happens so fast, especially with the internet, that there's so many little points that are going on, but I'll just go based off of what I know today. Then, of course, I'll go number 3, the invasion, of course, all of that. Then I want to talk about kind of the Russian propaganda that's going around, what we know now. Let's kind of go hand in hand. Again, number 6 is Elon Musk. I feel like he pops up in every single one of the podcast episodes I have. But, I mean, he is the richest man in the world, so he's bound to end up somewhere in the news. 7, this was the one I was thinking about just doing an episode on. I wanted to talk about kind of the dark humor memes that are spreading around about this. That aren't really just, especially people in, North America. But, I'm probably going to do another episode on the effects of kind of media and memes and what this is kind of doing to our culture. So I'll probably do that in another episode. And then, of course, number 8 is World War III, question mark. And that is also going to be discussed based on what we know today. So why don't we get into the background and the history of the conflict? Because I really just think that's what we need to talk about to really understand why this invasion even happened. So right now I'm reading an article from the Smithsonian Magazine, a very reputable source, just so everybody knows. Of course, it's always linked. So, okay, basically, this starts at, okay, how do I want to begin this? Because, I just want to get the proper information. So there's a lot of Russian propaganda going around, especially spread by, of course, Vladimir Putin. So this kind of propaganda can really affect, because a lot of it's rewriting history. So one of the points here that they make is that an essay published on the Kremlin's website in Russia, Ukrainian and English last July, Putin credited Soviet Union with inventing a Ukrainian republic within the Soviet Union in 1922. Sorry, one second. 1922. Forging a fictitious state unworthy of sovereignty out of historically Russian territory. After Ukraine declared its independence in 1991, the president argued Ukrainian leaders began to mythologicalize and rewrite history, out everything that united Russia and Ukraine, and referred to the period when Russia was part of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union as an occupation. So this kind of article goes into saying, the historic reality of modern-day Ukraine is a lot more complex than what Putin is putting forth. So it's kind of like Putin saying, no, you were Russia. And Ukraine's like, this is kind of what, you're not explaining this right. This is not what happened. So, the thing is, I hope everybody knows where Russia and Ukraine is on the map, because I really would feel bad. I saw that, being a little bit sidetracked, but I saw that, that video of Kamala Harris, who is the VP of, the USA, and she basically said, so the Ukraine is a country in Europe, and it's right beside Russia. Russia's a big, bad country, and Ukraine's a tiny little country. I'm over-dramatizing it, obviously. Again, for record, I'm over-dramatizing it. But it was quite funny because she really had to explain. So yes, Russia is beside Ukraine. Russia's the biggest country in the world in terms of landmass. And the Ukraine's is beside it. The Ukraine's very tiny. I hope you can understand that. Pull up a map if you want to visualize it. But you know, kind of this Russia and Ukraine thing has been going on for a while. So actually, Austro-Hungarian empires, which this kind of includes Poland and Lithuania, have all kind of wanted the jurisdiction over Ukraine, which first asserted as modern independence in 1917. So this was a long time ago, definitely not based off of Putin's events that he was putting forth. And they formed the Ukrainian People's Republic. So Russia kind of gained control back of the Ukraine, making it part of the Soviet Union and regaining power until World War II, when Germany invaded. So this is a good point. We have to remember, looking back in history, we have to remember the First World War, we have to remember the Second World War. So of course, the Second World War is very famous, you know, Nazis and, you know, the Holocaust, of course. And a lot of this pushed a lot of our modern history today. World War II can account for a lot of the things that we see today, a lot of the fights we see today, a lot of the alliances were all kind of pushed because of World War II. And, I mean, not just World War II, obviously, but a lot of events in history, I mean, all of them really are a domino effect. You push a domino, and they all kind of fall down. And they all hit each other at a certain point, and they all connect to each other in some way. Of course, we have other big worldly events that change the world, not just World War II, but, you know, when we think of the World Wars, it's probably the one you think of the most. So, anyways, Germany invaded, and then kind of, there's been a lot of debates on remembering this wartime history and the implications for Ukrainian nationalism and independence, which is key to understanding this current conflict. So again, I'm reading this pretty much word for word, just so you know, again, remember the disclaimer. So in Putin's telling, the modern Ukrainian independence movement began not in 1917, but during World War II, under the German occupants of Ukraine, between 1941 and 1944, when World War II took place. Some Ukrainian independence fighters aligned themselves with the Nazis, whom they viewed as saviors from Soviet oppression. Putin has drawn on this period in history to bring Ukrainian push for sovereignty as a Nazi endeavor. So Putin is kind of pushing this narrative and saying, hey guys, basically, Ukraine, the only reason why they want to be independent is because they're Nazis. Which is just, when you put it that way, you put it in really layman's terms. Putin's basically saying, yeah. They were basically just Nazis. They were Nazi fans. They loved the Nazis. And they were like, yeah, no, Russia, no. And this is just so off the mark of history. It doesn't even make sense. Obviously, a lot of this time can be blurry, right? We didn't have the same documentation that we have today. We didn't have kind of the same things we have today. So, you know, a lot of this stuff can be up in the air, but we definitely know that in 1917, they gained independence, or some sort of independence that they could have gained at the time, some sort of modern independence. So the fact that Putin's trying to push this narrative that, you know, they are Nazis, the Ukrainian people are Nazis, is absolutely just doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even align with history. So, you know, again, a lot of people are saying, you know, this guy from Harvard University at the Ukrainian Research Institute said, it's really just a stunningly cynical attempt to fight for information war and influence people's opinions. So this really reminds me, and I know this is kind of going off the cusp, but it really does remind me of the book 1984. Highly recommend it if you haven't read it. And actually, a lot of that book was based off of World War II and the thoughts at that time. World War II was a huge push for saying, hey, we don't want communism, or hey, we don't want the big man in charge. You know, people are fighting for their independence because there was a scary force that we could have had communism and we could have been in that state. So a lot of the literature at that time was written from that mindset. And the book really was about this big brother figure. I've already heard of the big brother figure. There's a show called Big Brother, which is the same concept, based off of the book in the same name, where it's this omniscient kind of government force that controls every single thing about your life, knows every single thing about you, and does every single thing. And, a lot of that book included the information war. So they completely changed the narrative. They made up things, right? The Big Brother made up things. Made up history, changed history, just totally skewed everything, lied, and all of this. And that's what the Putin thing is, right? And, luckily now we have a lot of this information stored on, our computers and stuff. But back in World War II, there were book burnings of Jewish people's books written about Jewish people. And this was a scary time, the burning of books. And this is a whole storyline in historical fiction, The Book Thief. And it's that the burning of information, the burning of books. And we can see that now too, or at least the attempt. Because information is probably one of the most powerful things in the world. Information is what drives society. If we didn't have information, data, you hear that whole data war. We hear how World War III the next World War would be online, right? Data is honestly one of the most important things in the world right now. And it will be for, I think, always, really, in a sense. Because information is what can really drive people. And when you can drive people or understand people, you can manipulate them and get what you want. So, really, a lot of people, have obviously challenged, a lot of scholars have publicly challenged Putin's version of this Nazi idea. And almost all these experts began their accounts with the fall of the Russian Empire, when tens of thousands of Ukrainians fought against the, I'm going to butcher this name, Bolshevik Red Army to establish the Ukrainian People's Republic. Ukrainians continued to fight for independence until 1922, when they were defeated by the Soviets and became the Ukrainian Soviet Republic of the Union of Soviet Social Republicans. That's a mouthful. But basically what this accounting is telling for is saying they were fighting for their freedom, and then Russia just kind of took them in, or the USSR just kind of took them in. So kind of by leaving out Ukrainian's short-lived but hard-fought period of independence in the early 20th century, Putin overlooks the country's sovereignty. So basically it's saying you're just ignoring that the country has always wanted to be separate, and now you're just saying it's because of the Nazis, really, is what they're getting at. So, so the Ukrainian people have fought for their sovereignty, for their independence for a very long time. And this is really pertinent to know. So, another kind of omnipotent version of this event were the events of Genocide of Suppression that took place in the Soviet Union. This was, most famous one was the Great Famine. So, this part of the article basically just talks about, the Ukrainians were starving and they were dying. And they claimed about 3.9 million lives, or 30% of the Ukrainian population in the early 1930s from this Great Famine. So a human-made famine, it was the direct result of Soviet policies aimed at punishing Ukrainian farmers who fought Soviet mandates to collectivize. So the Soviets also waged an intense Russification campaign, persecuting Ukrainians culturally and alleviating Russian language and culture above all others. So this, again, you can really pull history from history here. And this, again, reminds me of something that happened in Canada a lot, of course, for the Native people, right? Children were pulled from their homes. They were taught to be white Christians or act like white Christians. Pull their culture out of them. And this is, again, in this retelling of the history, is what they're saying. They're saying that the Soviets were making the Ukrainian people Russian. And this is where that blur happens. So it's like, well, the Ukrainians were always Russian. No! They wanted their independence for a very long time. But it was this narrative that was pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed because Russia pushed it on them. So when Germany invaded in 1941, some Ukrainians, especially those in Western Ukraine, saw them as liberators. So there's political science at Tufts University said. So the Ukrainians didn't particularly want to live under the Germans so much as escape the Soviets. who is the president. So this is president. So the broader objective, so this is a quote, the broader objective was to establish an independent state. But in the process, Ukrainians also engaged in participation in the Holocaust. So the Ukrainians just wanted to be alone. Like, they didn't want Germany, they didn't want the Soviets. But Germany was better than the Soviets because Germany seemed like they were liberating the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians was like, okay, hey, yeah, I'll do this Holocaust thing. And obviously I'm saying this in very layman terms. But they're basically saying, yeah, I'll do that. I just want to be independent. And that's what they were going for. So yeah, maybe they seemed like they were aligned with the Nazis, but really it was this push to just be independent as a whole. So there's this question, right? How do we treat this history? So the Soviet point of view that Putin still embraces is simple, she says. The Holocaust aside, Ukrainian nationalists were bad guys, quote unquote, because they fought the Soviet state. Putin and other critics also often draw on Ukrainians' wartime collaboration with the Nazis to basically characterize the modern country as a Nazi nation. In this February 24, 2022 speech, the Russian president deemed the, quote, demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, quote, key goals of the invasion. So Putin's really pulling at this narrative that, hey, Ukrainians still are Nazis, the Ukrainians are Nazis, and we are not letting them be Nazis anymore as long as we take them in and take their country, even though they've always wanted to be a sovereign state. It's ignoring, right, if we have data, right, we learn data all the time in science class, in math class. If we have a data set, and we're looking at a piece of data, oh, sorry about that, guys, sorry, I had a message. I am so sorry about that. I don't know how to mute those, actually. I deeply apologize for that. I'm going to try and see how I can mute this while I keep talking. Sorry about that. Anyways, that really cut me off. Anyways, it's really, I was really going on a tangent, too. But it's really, if you have this science project again, or this math project, and you have this data set, but there's this one piece of data that you don't really like, right? Right now in math, I'm learning about functions. And let's say I have this data set, and there is one part of the data set that makes it not a function, but a relation. And I just ignore that. I just say, hey, you know what? I don't like that piece of data, so I'm going to take it out. Oh, look, now it's a function. Well, now I completely changed that data set to fill my own narrative, to say, no, I wanted it to be a function, so I'm going to take out this piece of information that makes it a relation. That's not how it works. That's not how history works. History happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. It's not always simple. It's not always cut and dry, but this is what happened. This is how it went down, and this was where the perspectives of every single side, right? Like, we look at the Soviet side, right? This is what the Soviets were seeing, too. But Ukraine wanted to be a sovereign state. Okay? They wanted to be a sovereign state. And that is really the end of it. That's all we need to know. And they are a sovereign state. So not were, they are a sovereign state that is being invaded. Okay? That is what is happening right now. So again, these Russian nationalists, Putin really, are pushing this Soviet narrative that doesn't even make sense. That wasn't even true. They just wanted to be independent. And, they thought that Germany was helping them. Like, what were they supposed to know, right? So from the Ukrainian side of the debate, the country's wartime history is more complex. So are the nationalists, quote-unquote, bad guys because they participated in the Holocaust, she will ask, or the quote-unquote good guys because they fought for independence? So for Putin, even raising this question is inflammatory. So, again, this political scientists are saying, any kind of revelation of the Soviet treatment of history is what Putin would consider a Nazi approach or Nazification. So to deny the claim that Ukraine is a Nazi state isn't to downplay the Nazis' wartime actions in Ukraine. So again, we aren't downplaying that Ukraine did have a play in the Nazis, right? With Nazis, right? They totally did, right? They did. And we're not denying that, but what were the motives, we have to think. We're not just looking at one person. What were the motives as a whole? And what it seems like the motives was for a push for independence. So another historian at the University of Minnesota points out that one of the biggest massacres of the Holocaust took place just outside of Kyiv. So this was between 1941 and 1943. So yes, they were basically right by the capital of Ukraine. So, aided by the collaborators, shot about 70,000 to 100,000 people, many of them Jews. So at Babian Yar, a Yavin at the outskirts of Kyiv. According to the national World War II Museum. 1 in every 4 Jewish victims of the Holocaust was murdered in the Ukraine. So yes, Ukraine committed a huge amount of wartime costs, right? They were a part of the Nazis. They were a part of the Holocaust in a big way. Okay, we are not denying that. But, it's nothing's not always black and white, right? They did play a big part, and we understand that. But that doesn't mean that they are automatically Nazis, or doesn't also mean that they are automatically, it's not cut and dry, right? They could have been just fighting for their independence, right? What is good, what is bad, right? They are good and they are bad. They are bad and they are good. But that was also so long ago. If they are still a sovereign state after World War II, and after World War II being that long ago, what do you think, right? Like, yes, we understand. We are not going to just ignore all the things. Again, looking at this, we're not just going to ignore the things they did as as Nazis, right? Or under Nazi rule. But we also have to look at it from another kind of perspective. And, we have to understand that. So, Germans often think of World War II as a fight against the Russians. The majority of the fighting actually took place in modern-day Ukraine and Belarus, as well as large parts of Western Russia. So, under German occupation, 7 million Ukrainians were sent to Germany to work on farms and factories. Still, because the Nazi racial hierarchy placed Ukrainians above Russians, the Nazis made a limited attempt to promote Ukrainian national culture and occupied territories, and moved that in turn helped bring some of the Ukrainian nationalist movement to the German side. So it's really complex, right? There's this complex side of the Holocaust and why they were on the side of Germans and why they were going, or Nazis, and why they were, doing these things. So, those nationalist groups certainly had anti-Semitic elements, so said Zelinski. So this is important. Quote, but they essentially felt that, or judged that, they were more likely to get Ukrainian independence under Nazi occupation than under Soviet occupation, end quote. That is a really heavy-hitting quote, I have to say, because if the peoples were more confident to be independent under Nazi control, we have a problem here, right? And they truly just wanted independence. So again, the Nazis, she says, promised Ukrainian nationalists as such, at least after the war. But even before their defeat by the Allies in 1945, the Germans turned on some of their Ukrainian allies, including one of the country's most famous independent fighters, Stefan Bandera. In his fight against the Soviets, Bandera aligned himself with the Germans, only to end up in a concentration camp after he refused to rescind the proclamation of Ukrainian statehood in 1941. Released in 1944 to help the Nazi battle against the Soviets again, Bandera survived the war, only to be poisoned by the KGB in 1959 and 2010. Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko awarded Bandera the title of Hero of Ukraine, but the honor was annullated a year later. So again, this is a quote. This re-examination of Ukrainian participation in wartime atrocities has prompted a relatively difficult dialogue in Ukraine about the issue of complexity, says Zelinski. So the thing is this is not black and white. Again, this is really, there's multiple sides, right? They're always in a group of people. There's always going to be people that are bad. There are always going to be people that are good. There's always going to be people that are black and white, no matter what way you put it. But when we look at everything in a whole, when we look at it in a broader picture, when we eliminate ourselves from this, really look outside of it and look at all sides, why was Ukraine more apt to want to be with the Nazis than with the Soviets? That's the perspective we need to put it in. And that's really what we need to think. We are not diminishing any side of the story, but we have to think, what was their motive as a whole? And there seemed to be a strong motive, especially looking at the history before World War II. It's not something that was just sparked in World War II. It was something that has been going on for a very long time, and we have to remember that. So again, Putin has referenced Ukrainian nationalists in service in his own political agenda, portraying modern Ukrainians as Nazis. So prior to Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea, which I will speak about, many Ukrainians viewed Bandera and other freedom fighters in less favorable light. However, she noticed after a shift with all these individuals, some of whom fought alongside the Nazis, being called heroes. The Soviets, once held up as liberators from the Nazis, were now the bad guys again. So it's not black and white. It's really not black and white. And, Bandera, again, is kind of mentioned. He may not be the official leader of Ukraine, but his memory is still, kind of with us. And again, these kind of legislations that went on. So, Democracy, which, let me see who that is exactly. I believe it might have been introduced before. I believe this is a political scientist. But anyways, for his part, believes that Ukraine is entitled to its own version of history, and that Ukrainians should be allowed to choose how to present their own experiences. He praises the local researchers of efforts to study the Holocaust and open their archives and notes. The Ukrainian current president, Vladimir Zelinski, is Jewish. Which again, yeah, it's so ironic too, because they're like, oh yeah, Putin's saying, oh yeah, the Ukrainians are Nazis, but President Zelinski is Jewish. So, if you want to keep that in your head as well. Ukraine has begun the process of confronting the darkest pages of its past. And, we really have to think about this for all people, right? We even look at somewhere like Canada, right, where I live. Canada is an amazing country. Everyone says it's the nicest country, or one of the nicest countries compared to, alongside like Denmark and Iceland and all of those countries. It's a very calm, nice country. But we have a dark history. We have a dark history of hurting Native people, of ripping away their culture. And I mean, I could do a whole podcast episode just on that, multiple probably. And there's tons of information about that out there, about, these camps that children were sent to and all of that. So every country has a dark past, and that's we need to shed light on it. There's no way around it. Of course we need to shed light on it. But we also need to realize in this situation right now that when we are looking for Russia invading Ukraine, the Ukrainian people are not Nazis, okay? That's kind of what I want to get across here. And, kind of in today's atmosphere, saying anything critical about Ukrainian nationalism, calling attention to Ukrainian nationalist involvement with the Nazis, can be seen as supporting Russia's depiction of Ukraine as a Nazi nation, Belsky notes. So this Russian narrative is nothing new, says Dobrsky. It's part of a long-term Russian information war on Ukraine. Long-time information war on Ukraine. I repeat, a long-term Russian information war on Ukraine. That's very important to know. So Putin's, historical justifications of the invasion doesn't surprise the scholar. What does surprise him is the outpouring of support he's seen from Ukraine, with even Saturday Night Live paying tribute to the beleaguered nation. So, a lot of people right now, which we've seen, are really supporting Ukraine for good reason, but it's in a big amount. So Dobrsky theorizes that the outrage response to invasion is tied to society's relatively recent re-examination of colonialism, because Ukraine was successfully integrated into the Soviet Union after World War II. Dobrsky doesn't see the period leading up to Ukrainian independence in 1991 as occupation, so much as a relationship between a colony and a colonizer. By waging war on Ukraine, Putin is, in essence, trying to hold onto a colony. Really, that's what it is. It's like if, UK, again, I'll use Canada as an example. If Canada got rid of the monarchy, which we basically have, but let's just say we totally got rid of UK, and UK tried to get us back, that would be colonism. But in our recent view of that, now everyone's like, this is bad. But before it wasn't. And there's a lot of intricacies. History is complex. And there's a lot of intricacies and how people view it and how all of these things, kind of, go about. So Russian leaders basically don't, so here's a quote, Russian leaders basically don't recognize any Ukrainian historical agency except the agency that they imagine for them, quote, says Dobrsky. So Ukraine and the world seem to be imagining something different. So there is a lot of Russian propaganda, which I've basically talked about right now. And a lot of this, again, is this misinformation. It's this information battle, data battle to try and flip the tables and bring about new information that truly is just not correct in a lot of ways. So, honestly, there is so much information about this conflict. And I really want to get more into what is happening right now, as we're already almost 40 minutes into the episode, and I got through one article. I seem to do this to myself a lot, and that's, you know what, that's okay. We're going to take today's episode slow and see how much we get done. So I hope you guys are sticking along with me. So as I did mention, this is from Vox. In 2014, and that's why this has been going on for so long. Okay, let me see. How am I going to begin this one? I always question that. Sorry for the... Okay, that was a lot of dead air. I was just going to say... Okay, I am so sorry for that. That was like almost 30 seconds of dead air. I hope you didn't just like totally cut my stream off. I'm okay. I'm sorry, that was a lot of dead air. And I apologize for that. I was reading, actually, funnily enough, some memes about the 2014 Russian conflict that kind of describe everything in a fun little graphic, which is always really weird when we have wars described as a graphic, but you know what? Sometimes it works. So let me do... There's so many dumb questions in this. So this was made in... So 2014 was when there was the annexation of Crimea. So, okay, so this all began as an internal Ukrainian crisis in November 2013, when President Viktor Yanukovych rejected a deal for greater integration with the UN. So this is a really big deal, sparking mass protests. And, you know, Ukraine, to be with the UN European Union, is very, very important. So, you know, since then, several big things have happened, and this is in the perspective of 2014. So a lot of things have happened. In February, anti-government protests toppled government and ran Yanukovych out of the country. Russia, trying to salvage its lost influence in Ukraine, invaded and annexed Crimea the next month. So in April, pro-Russian separatist rebels began seizing territory in eastern Ukraine. The rebels shot down a Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 on July 17th, killing 298 people, probably accidentally. Fighting between the rebels and Ukrainian military intensified. The rebels started losing, and in August, the Russian army overtly invaded eastern Ukraine to support the rebels. This is all about the relationship between Russia and the West to its lowest point since the Cold War. So there's a bunch of sanctions. So really, I really read a really brief information on the 2014 Ukraine crisis because this is not what this episode's about. But I just want to give that little bit of background that yes, this war, you know, people saying it's been going on for 8 years because it technically has in a way. They annexed Crimea 8 years ago as kind of again wanting to take over Ukraine and take back Ukraine. It's this whole narrative. So I think that's all I'm going to talk about the history because there is so much information about it and I have so many articles. And I just want to talk about now the leading up to the actual invasion. So, why don't we get into it? So, here's a little bit of a timeline. This is from Reuters. I really enjoyed this article because it's very simple. So, okay, here we go, starting at 1991. Shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine declares independence from Moscow. So 1991 is when they declared independence. So if we do the math, if we do some simple arithmetic, they have been independent for over 30 years. Let's make sure I am not really bad at math right now and I'm not embarrassing myself. But yeah, they've been for like 31 years. So they've been independent for over 30 years. They've been a sovereign state, and they've been wanting to be a sovereign state for over 100 years. So I think that's kind of all really important. You know, that's kind of a good point to know. So in 2004, pro-Russian candidate Viktor Yanukovych, which I just mentioned actually, Yanukovych was the guy who was pro-Russia and was kind of helping them do all this stuff. And then when he got kicked out, Russia was like, oh no, we're going to annex Crimea. So basically, he is declared president, but with allegations of vote rigging, triggered protests. It was the Orange Revolution, forcing a rerun of the vote. Pro-Western former Prime Minister Viktor Yushchenko is elected president. So in 2005, Yushchenko takes power and promises to lead Ukraine out of Kremlin's orbit. towards NATO and the EU. NATO and the EU are so important. The EU, of course, is the European Union. NATO is what is the acronym for NATO? I'm so sorry. But NATO's basically the big guy who, like, protects everybody. And if one country gets hit that's in NATO, all of NATO goes and fights with them. That's a simple way to put it. Let me see. NATO stands for... Spelled that wrong. North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So basically... this was formally established in April 1949, 4 years after World War II. What does NATO do? So this is a safeguard by the Allies' freedom and security by political and military means. So this is really important. NATO is a huge timeline in this, and when you do research Russia and Ukraine, you see NATO pop up a lot. This is because NATO is really what could protect the Ukraine from Russia, right? Russia wants the Ukraine. Right? Russia has wanted the Ukraine for a very long time. Some presidents have not invaded the country, but we've seen Putin do so. And it was an effort to keep Ukraine and take back Ukraine in a way, or take back what he thought he had. Or, you know, his country had. And NATO, if they were a part of NATO, they would have protected them about this, and that's when it would have turned World War III, technically. And that's why, you know, when people say World War III is going to happen, it's really if NATO gets involved, and I'll get into that as well. So, in 2008, NATO promises Ukraine it will one day join the alliance. This is another really important note. So, in 2008, they promise it will one day join. So, in 2010, Yankovich wins the presidential election. Yankovich? I think that's the guy, the pro-Russian guy. Yeah. So, sorry, Yankovich, which was a pro-Russian guy, won. And then 2013, Yankovich's government suspends trade association talks with EU. So, basically, Yankovich, because he is pro-Russian, he's like, no, we don't want to be part of the EU. We don't want to be part of NATO. We're going to stop. And opts to receive economic ties with Moscow, triggering months of mass rallies in Kyiv. So, the Ukrainian people are like, no, we do not want to be a part of Russia. How many times do we have to tell you? Our own president is not allying for us. He is saying we want to be a part of Russia when we don't, and he's trying to get us to be a part of Russia. So, you know, Yankovich, again, with his, you know, kind of voting rigging, too, or at least allegations of voting rigging, is this other part of it. So, in February 2014, as I did mention, Parliament votes to remove Yankovich after bloodshed in the protests. Bloodshed. Important to note, Ukraine has been through a lot. So within days, armed men seized the parliament in the Ukrainian region of Crimea and raised the Russian flag. That must hurt. Moscow later annexes the territory. April 2014, pro-Russian separatists in the eastern region of Donetsk declare independence. Some 15,000 people have been killed since 2014 and fighting between the separatists and Ukrainian army, according to Kyiv government. So this has been going on for a very long time, and the Ukrainian people have shed bloodshed. There has been bloodshed to be independent. The Ukrainian people want to be a sovereign state. They are a sovereign state. They want to be alone and left alone. And in 2017, an association agreement between Ukraine and EU opens markets for free trades of goods and services and visa-free travel to EU for Ukrainians. So they are basically becoming part of the EU. 2019, former comic actor. Get to know. This guy is a big guy right now. Vladimir Zelinski is elected president, and obviously he's a big guy now. So, January 2021. We are going from last year, time of recording this, or last year, 3 months ago. Oh my gosh, it's already in March. So basically, January 2021, Zelinski appeals to U.S. President Joe Biden to let Ukraine join NATO. So Zelinski's like, hey, we do want to join NATO. Don't listen to that other guy, Volosevich. And we do, please. February, his government freezes the assets of opposition leader Viktor Yanukovych, the Kremlin's most prominent ally in Ukraine. So the most prominent ally of Russia. So they seize his assets. Spring 2021, Russia begins massing troops near Ukraine's borders, and what it says, they are training exercises. Training exercises. Get that in your head. This is not just a spark at the moment. This has been going on forever. And this invasion, we see spring 2021. November 2021. Satellite images taken by Madagascar Technologies show ongoing buildup of Russian forces near Ukraine, with estimates soon surpassing 100,000 troops deployed. December 17, 2021. Russia presents security demands, including that NATO pull back troops and weapons from Eastern Europe and bar Ukraine from ever joining. Russia is saying, don't let them join, or we're going to come in, or we're going to come in anyway, because that's kind of what happened. January 24th, 2022, so this was very recent. NATO puts forces on standby and reinforces Eastern Europe with more ships and fighter jets. NATO is scared. NATO is getting ready. January 26th, 2 days later, Washington responds to Russia's security demands, repeating a commitment to NATO's open-door policy while offering a pragmatic evaluation of Moscow's concerns. 2 days later, Russia says the demands not addressed. February 2022, amid growing Western fears, Russia could attack Ukraine. The U.S. says it will send 3,000 extra troops to NATO members, Poland and Romania. Okay, the thing is, with NATO, they can't send any troops to Ukraine because they aren't a part of NATO, because they weren't approved for NATO. So, they can't even help them out. In Ukraine, in the country of Ukraine. So, Washington allies say they will not send troops to Ukraine, but warn of severe economic sanctions if Russian President Vladimir Putin takes military action. February 21st, in TV address, Putin says Ukraine is an integral part of Russian history and as puppet regime managed by foreign powers, basically, again, that whole Nazi thing. Putin orders that he called peacekeeping forces into 2 breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine after recognizing them as independent. February 22nd, a day later, the U.S., Britain, and their allies sanctioned Russian parliament members, banks, and other assets. So, we've seen this huge freezing of all the Russian assets, and they have frozen their money. We've seen the whole... They're worth $0. They've seen the decline in their dollar. We've frozen everything. So, Germany halts the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project as well. So, we've seen a lot of this too, the gas and the electricity, which is another huge point. February 23rd, a day later, again, Russian-backed separatist leaders ask Russia for help, repelling aggression from Ukrainian army. The day later, again, February 24th, Putin authorizes, quote-unquote, special military operations in Ukraine. Russian forces begin missile and artillery attacks, striking major Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv. The invasion has happened on February 24th. February 26th. Western allies announced new sanctions, including restrictions on Russia's central bank, which is that whole dollar thing, and expelling key banks off the main global payments system. That's where we're at right now. That is what is happening. This issue is it's evolving so much, so rapidly, and I want to talk more about it, but I don't even know where to begin. Switzerland has offered sanctions where they haven't offered sanctions for decades. They are a neutral country and they're even sanctioning Russia. It's really evolving, and it's really evolving really, really, really quickly. And I really have to almost delete almost all of these articles. I've gotten through 3, and I have to really almost delete a lot of these, because a lot of these are so ever evolving. I can't even keep up with stuff that has happened today. And obviously I don't want to do too many opinion pieces, because those kind of spew a lot of, kind of these propaganda measures. And there's a lot going on. I think I really, truly am going to do another episode probably within the next week or 2. And just, again, update you on everything that's been happening. I mean, I'm going to look at my list, because I don't want this to lag on too much as well, because everything's ever evolving, and I really have just done the background of the Russia-Ukrainian conflicts, and as well as a little bit of the timeline leading up to the invasion. I don't even think I can get into the invasion today and all the details regarding that in the past few weeks, so I don't think I will. There has been a lot going on, and there's been a lot of Russian propaganda, so I really think I'm going to almost just do the invasion, and this episode will be titled, for your information, it will be titled kind of the history of the Ukrainian and Russia conflict and events leading up to the invasion. And I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave it at today. I do want to do a little bit of a global conflict tracker and almost do one of those. I also have this, the CNN is updating things every single minute, basically, and I also want to, I think I might link this article in as well, so if you want to check that out. But I do have a really good, global conflict tracker here. So this is, from the Conflict of Foreign Relations, and this is a conflict in Ukraine, of course, and I'm just looking at the global tracking part. So, there's, conflict status is worsening, of course, type of conflict, territorial dispute, impact on U.S. interests is critical right now, and having gone into that region, of course, is in Europe. So, okay, these are kind of the big sources right now. So, more than 50,000 estimated number of casualties in Ukraine from 2014 to 2021. Okay, so keep that in mind. 1.7 million Ukrainian refugees since that invasion date. So, we've had 1.7 million people leave the Ukraine and flee, which is so concerning. And there's been $2.5 billion in U.S. security assistance committed to Ukraine since 2014. So the U.S. has put a lot of money into this as well. Sorry, the U.S., put a lot of money into Ukraine. So, I mean, everything is really evolving. And today's episode was productive. I think it was super important to talk about the history, because that's the only way we can really understand why this is happening, why there's different points of view, why there's different perspectives. So kind of as a little bit of a conclusion to today's episode, I am so sorry. I really have to almost block everybody who is messaging me, because it is quite annoying that I have to keep listening to the beeps. Guys, I am so sorry that happened twice today's episode, and I usually never get messages while I record these, so I'm so sorry about that. But anyways, there's a little quick conclusion to this. So in today's episode, and I really want to mention what I did talk about in today's episode again, because this is very time-based. Today is Monday, March 7th. It is now 10 p.m., but I didn't cover any conflicts that happened today, so that doesn't quite matter, but 2022. So today, I did talk about all about the background and history of the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. That's really all I talked about. Then I also did mention all the events, the dates leading up to that February 24th, 2022 date. Remember that. February 24th, 2022, when the invasion actually struck. This is ever-evolving. This is ever-changing. It's an ever-changing world. Gonna, hide that podcast name in there a little bit. It's an ever-changing world. Ever-changing conflict. And I really do want to mention that today's episode, I do think this probably can be used in future weeks, maybe months, because this stuff has already happened, and it's something that's not evolving, right? Like, that lead up to the invasion has happened. So, new information might spark, of course, and obviously look out for that, but this is what we know right now, this is what I know right now. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So today's episode, I'm probably just going to name it something like History of Ukrainian and Russian Conflict. And I think that's kind of where I want to leave it at today. I did not talk about the invasion itself and what's been happening. I did go into a bit of Russian propaganda. That happens a lot, though, so I probably will talk about that again next episode. I'm assuming I'll do this again next week, because I really don't think I can talk about anything else right now. I have other episode ideas in mind. Like, I still have that NFT episode in mind, but I think I gotta wait on that. And then as well, kind of what we know now, I did touch on that. Elon, I did not mention at all the memes. I just want to do a totally, separate episode on just dark humor. But anyways, and the World War III thing I kind of touched on a little bit. But really, I just wanted to use this episode, and I'm glad this episode took this long, because I really did want to do the due diligence in the background. I wanted to do the due diligence and really talking about what this event has been, the lead up to the event, and I really wanted to make sure you guys understood the timeline, right? I am going to link I mentioned 3 articles, one from Smithsonian, one from Vox, and one from Rutgers, and then I also have that timeline as well, that conflict kind of number tracker. And I might also add in the CNN live updates. I use that one a lot, and I'm probably going to mention that in the next episode that I talk about this conflict, or this war. So I will also link that in. Today's episode, I think, really is a great introductory episode to this whole conflict. I really want to mention that, and I really want to make sure you guys kind of understand what has happened, why this has all happened, because a lot of misinformation can be spread, especially in stuff that is happening right now, right? The stuff that's happening right now is spreading a lot. We look at TikTok, we look at YouTube, Don't trust these sources that are not true, right? I have done my due diligence in researching this, and I know that I can trust myself in doing my due diligence, right? I'm linking all the articles. If I get something wrong, let me know, right? Like, be honest with me, tell me, because I do not want misinformation up. I've done my due diligence in this, and I've put the information up that I know I have right, and I know that is correct from trustworthy resources. So I want to disclaim you guys, after listening to this episode, don't just go on TikTok and see some funny TikToks and assume everything is true, because you know what? It's probably not. The internet can be a great place, but can also be a horrible place where misinformation is spread a lot. As well, Russia propaganda can be spread a lot. So make sure you keep everything on a watchful eye. Make sure every single resource is correct, and make sure you really keep up with updates that are true and correct and timely. So today's episode, again, I really just talked about the background, so I hope you guys kind of enjoyed as a little bit of an end of a show wrap up. Please, again, look at the resources that I've linked. It is ever changing, and I want to make sure that I got everything right as well. Thank you all for listening. Please check out my social media for any updates on anything that I post. My Instagram for Ever Changing World Podcast is ever.changingworld. Again, it's ever.changingworld for Instagram. For Twitter, it's everchangingwor. Again, everchangingwor. The website is shows.acast.com/ever-changing-world. Again, shows.acast.com/ever-changing-world. Again, guys, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please tune in to next week's episode. And I do also want to mention, specifically in today's episode, if anybody ever, it's a tough time for everybody right now, especially people who are involved in this conflict, ever want to reach out to me, please just reach out. I am a listening ear. I will listen to what you have. I am here for everyone that is going through this conflict, that's going through these tough times. I understand what is happening, and I hope everyone is doing okay, and my thoughts are with everybody during this time. So, everybody, please, I will do an updated episode on this for sure about the actual invasion, Russian propaganda, all the other stuff that's going on with this, because there's so much in another episode. But for now, that is just the background and history of the Russian and Ukrainian conflict. I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all next Tuesday. Thank you.